My name is Grace Nguyen. I never thought I'd find myself powerless in my own home watching my daughter open the front door wide, not for friends or family, but for strangers, homeless people no less, to come in and eat at our table. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story, because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. The first time it happened, I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, humming softly to myself as I laid plates on the table. The sun was dipping low, casting a warm golden glow through the window. I thought it would be a quiet evening, just my daughter Anna and me sharing a meal like usual. But then I heard the car pull into the driveway, a sound I recognized instantly. Anna's old blue sedan, reliable and sturdy. What I didn't expect was the figure trailing behind her as she got out, a man in tattered clothes, unshaven, with eyes full of despair and exhaustion. I stopped what I was doing, heart pounding in my chest. For a moment I couldn't speak. Who was this man? Why was Anna bringing him here? "Mom, this is David," Anna said brightly, the kind of brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's been living on the streets for months. I thought he could use a warm meal." Warm meal. Two simple words that shook the foundation of everything I believed about safety, order, and family boundaries. I wanted to say no. To tell her this was not our home to be used as a refuge for strangers. But the look on her face, so earnest, so desperate, made my mouth dry up. Instead, I forced out, "Anna, you don't know what kind of people you're bringing into our lives. It's dangerous." She smiled almost pityingly. "David's not dangerous. He's just hurt." That night, as I lay awake in bed, I thought about the man in our living room eating food I had prepared. I thought about my daughter's open heart and my own growing fears. Was I being too harsh? Or was this a mistake waiting to happen? The days that followed were a blur of strangers showing up at our doorstep. Men and women I didn't know, each carrying their own scars and stories of hardship. Anna welcomed them all, offering food, blankets, and sometimes even a place to sleep. Our house, once a sanctuary for family, slowly transformed into something else, something I didn't recognize anymore. My husband Richard retreated into silence. He didn't want to upset Anna, and truth be told, he was uncomfortable with confrontation. So the weight of this new reality fell mostly on me. One evening, after a particularly tense day, I gathered my courage. "Anna, please. This has to stop. Our safety is at risk. You don't know these people. What if something happens? What if they take advantage of our kindness?" Her eyes flashed with a stubborn fire I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, rebelling against curfews and rules. "Mom, these people are human beings. They have nowhere else to go." "And what about us?" I pleaded, voice trembling. "What about your brother? What about our family?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to back down. "I can't turn my back on them. Not when I know what it's like to feel alone." Her words stabbed me. I thought I had raised her better, taught her to protect what was ours first. But now it seemed her compassion was pulling her away from me, away from everything I believed in. I started to feel invisible in my own home. The people I had trusted, the routines that once grounded me, they were slipping away, replaced by chaos and uncertainty. And then one night it happened, the moment that shattered the fragile peace I was clinging to. David, the first homeless man Anna had brought home, disappeared. No one knew where he went. Anna was frantic, blaming herself. I saw the cracks in her armor, the vulnerability behind her tough exterior. That's when I realized something else was happening beneath the surface, something I hadn't seen before. Anna wasn't just helping strangers. She was searching for belonging, for meaning, for a way to fill a hole I didn't even know existed. I wanted to reach out to her, to understand, but the distance between us was growing every day. The house felt colder, the silence louder. My warnings became pleas. My pleas became arguments. But Anna stood firm. This story isn't just about a daughter bringing homeless people into her mother's home. It's about what happens when love and fear collide, when compassion clashes with survival instincts, when family ties stretch so thin they threaten to snap. I hope by sharing this you'll see the complexity of the choices we face. Because sometimes the people we love most can become the source of our greatest struggles. And as much as I feared losing her, I was about to learn that losing myself was an even greater risk. The night David disappeared, the house felt emptier than ever. I could still see his worn face in my mind, the tired eyes that held stories I could never begin to imagine. Anna locked herself in her room, and I could hear her quiet sobs muffled by the door. I wanted to reach out to comfort her, but I felt like a stranger in my own home. The following evening, Anna came home again, but this time it wasn't just David who came with her. Behind her stepped a woman named Lisa, a thin, fragile soul with haunted eyes and trembling hands. Anna introduced her softly. "Mom, this is Lisa. She's been living on the streets for months. I thought she could use a place to rest and a warm meal." I was torn. Part of me wanted to shut the door to reclaim the peace I felt slipping away. But another part, a softer, quieter part, wanted to open my arms and help. Lisa sat at the dinner table with us, her eyes wide, absorbing the warmth of a place she hadn't known in months. As she ate slowly, I watched Anna's face, the way she lit up when she saw someone feel safe, if only for a few hours. It was beautiful. It was heartbreaking. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the growing number of guests in our home. They weren't just visitors. They were becoming a part of our daily lives. Our family dinners now included strangers with painful pasts, stories that stained the air with sadness. I tried again to talk to Anna. "This has to stop. You're putting us all at risk." My voice trembled, but I needed her to understand. She looked at me with a fire I hadn't seen since she was a rebellious teenager. "Mom, you don't understand. These people need us. We have to help." I wanted to scream to make her see the danger, but all I could do was feel the distance grow between us. Neighbors began to notice the strangers coming and going. Friendly nods turned into suspicious glances. One day, Mrs. Keller, our next-door neighbor, approached me. "Grace, dear, are you sure this is wise?" she asked gently. "I'm trying," I said, forcing a smile. Inside, I felt unraveling. Then came the night Richard finally spoke up. His voice was strained, filled with exhaustion. "Anna, this has to end. Our family is breaking apart." Anna's response was fierce, almost desperate. "I know what I'm doing. I'm trying to help. Why can't you see that?" Their argument echoed through the house, piercing and raw. I stood, frozen tears streaming down my face, feeling the fragile foundation of our family crumble. That was when I overheard Anna talking quietly with Marcus, one of the guests. "I've been where they are," she whispered. "I know what it's like to be invisible." Her words stopped me cold. I realized that the strangers she was helping were not just people in need. They were shadows of her own past, broken pieces she was trying to heal. And as she reached out to them, she was also reaching out for herself. I tried to bridge the gap, to understand her pain, but every attempt was met with silence or resistance. The home I had known was slipping away, replaced by a reality I no longer recognized. One morning, I watched Anna gently help Lisa crack eggs for breakfast. Lisa's hands trembled, but Anna's steady presence brought calm. I felt a flicker of hope, maybe through compassion we could all find healing. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. The cost of opening our doors was higher than I had ever imagined. Then the truth came out, a secret from Anna's past that shattered everything. It was a truth I wasn't ready for, and one that would force me to question not only my daughter, but myself. The secret that Anna finally shared that rainy afternoon cracked open a door I never thought would exist in our relationship. It wasn't just a confession. It was a window into a past so dark and lonely that I had no choice but to see her differently. Not as the perfect daughter I thought I knew, but as a woman who had survived storms I could barely imagine. I was homeless, she said, voice trembling. For a whole week during my sophomore year of college, I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. I wanted to ask why how, but I held back afraid the floodgates would open and we'd both drown in pain. She continued. I was ashamed, Mom. I thought if I told you, you'd look at me differently like I'd failed. So I kept it to myself. Her eyes searched mine for understanding. I blinked back tears. How could I not have known, I whispered. Anna smiled weakly. You were busy, and I was good at hiding it. But that week changed everything. It made me realize how fragile life is, how quickly everything can fall apart. I sat there, the weight of her words settling on me like a heavy fog. The daughter I had always believed was sheltered, protected, was not the whole story. She had scars, invisible but deep. And now those scars were shaping every choice she made. When she started bringing those people home, the homeless, the lost, the broken, I finally understood. She wasn't just helping strangers. She was reaching out to the part of herself she'd buried. That night, we stayed up talking for hours. I learned about the nights she spent curled up under cold bridges, the hunger, the fear, the crushing loneliness. I listened to her dreams of making a difference, of being the light for those swallowed by darkness. And yet, as much as I wanted to embrace her mission, fear gnawed at me. I was a mother. I had a duty to protect my family. How could I do that when our home was becoming a sanctuary for people I didn't know, people who carried their own pain, their own secrets? The days that followed were a blur of emotions, pride, fear, confusion. Anna's world was expanding, but mine was shrinking. I felt invisible in my own home, watching her build bridges to people I could barely trust. One afternoon, I found Anna sitting with Marcus, one of the men she had taken in. He was tall with a guarded expression and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. I overheard part of their conversation. I was like you once, Marcus said quietly. Lost, forgotten. It takes a long time to find your way back. Anna nodded. That's why I can't turn my back on them. They're not just strangers. They're pieces of me. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I wanted to reach out to touch her shoulder, but the distance between us felt too vast. Then came the night that changed everything. Two of the guests, David and another man, got into a heated argument over something trivial. Voices rose, tempers flared, and before I could react, a chair crashed to the floor. The tension was thick, suffocating. I intervened, heart pounding, trying to calm them down. But inside, I was terrified. What if this escalated? What if someone got hurt? The next morning, I confronted Anna. This has to end, I said, voice trembling. I can't live like this, walking on eggshells in my own home. She looked at me fierce and determined. I won't stop, Mom. Not until they're safe. Not until they have a chance. I realized then that this wasn't just about charity or kindness anymore. This was Anna's way of healing her own wounds. Her mission to save others was also a mission to save herself. But what about the rest of us? What about the family I was supposed to protect? Things spiraled quickly after that. The neighbors grew suspicious. Whispers turned into complaints. One day, Mrs. Keller came to my door with a worried look. Grace, dear, I think it's time to do something, she said softly. This neighborhood isn't safe for all these strangers. That same day, the police came knocking. Reports had been made about suspicious activity. They asked questions, took notes. I felt exposed, vulnerable. Our home, once a place of refuge, was now a battleground. Anna stood by her guests, fiercely defending them with everything she had. But I saw the toll it took on her, the exhaustion, the worry, the never-ending struggle. And I saw what it did to Richard. He retreated more and more, avoiding conflict, burying his fears deep inside. I felt myself sinking, torn between the daughter I loved and the mother who needed safety. One evening, I found Anna crying in her room. For once, she was vulnerable, raw. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. I want to help, but I'm scared too. I sat beside her, taking her hand in mine. We're scared together, I said. But we have to find a way to protect both your heart and this family. The road ahead was uncertain. There were more secrets, more battles to come. But for the first time, we were no longer alone. We had each other. After that night, when Anna finally let her guard down and shared her fears with me, something shifted between us. It was as if the walls we'd both built, my protective caution and her stubborn compassion, began to crack. Not enough to collapse, but enough to let light in. I realized that if this family was going to survive, we couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. We needed to face the truth, the fears and the messiness, head on. The next morning, I called a family meeting. Richard, Anna, and I sat in the living room, tense but ready to talk. I know things have gotten out of hand, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. But we need boundaries. We can't let this house become a shelter for everyone who walks through the door. Richard nodded, relief evident on his face. We're losing ourselves. Our privacy, our peace. Anna looked at us, sadness and determination fighting in her eyes. I understand. But these people, they're not just guests. They're part of our family now. They need us. There was a long silence. I could feel the weight of her words. And beneath them, the invisible wounds we all carried. We agreed on a plan, a compromise. Anna would continue to help, but with limits. We'd screen guests carefully. We'd set rules to keep the house safe and peaceful. For a while it worked. The tension eased. The guests came and went in a more orderly way. The neighbors stopped whispering. Mostly. But peace, as I learned, is often fragile. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the kitchen, Anna pulled me aside, her face pale. Mom, I need to tell you something. She took a shaky breath and confessed that one of the guests, Marcus, had a violent history. He'd been arrested years ago, involved in a fight that had almost ruined his life. I felt my heart drop. We had invited danger inside unknowingly. But Anna defended him. He's changed. He's trying. I wanted to believe her. But fear whispered louder. Days later, Marcus disappeared. No goodbyes. No explanations. The house felt colder without him. Then came the police knock again, this time with questions about Marcus's whereabouts. I realized our house was no longer just a home. It was under scrutiny, a place where pasts collided with present realities. The strain was unbearable. Richard retreated further, silent dinners and distant glances becoming the norm. Anna threw herself into her mission harder, desperate to prove she was making a difference. And me, I was stuck in the middle, caught between protecting my family and supporting my daughter. One night I found Anna sitting on the porch, staring into the darkness. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I sat beside her, the weight of years pressing down. We don't have to do it alone, I said softly. Maybe it's time to ask for help. That's when I reached out to a local shelter, connecting Anna with professionals who could support the people she wanted to help. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But slowly the chaos began to settle. Our home regained some of its peace. Anna learned to balance her heart with caution, and I learned to let go just a little. Looking back, I see that this journey tested us in ways I never imagined. It broke us down and built us up again. Because sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes love has to be guided by wisdom and boundaries. And sometimes the hardest thing is learning to trust not just others, but each other. It was a call I dreaded, the kind that sends a cold shiver down your spine before you even hear the words. I was in the kitchen wiping down the counters after dinner when my phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown, but I answered anyway. Mrs. Nguyen, a calm but serious voice said, "This is Officer Ramirez from the local police department. We need to speak with you about some recent reports concerning your daughter's guests." My heart skipped a beat. I gripped the phone tightly, trying to steady my breathing. "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "There's been an accusation against one of the men staying at your home. David. He's been reported for theft in the neighborhood. We don't have all the facts yet, but we wanted to inform you and request your cooperation should we need to speak with your daughter or any of the people staying with you. I thanked the officer and hung up, my mind racing. David, the man Anna had brought into our home with such hope and trust, accused of stealing. I stood there for a long moment, the silence around me feeling heavier than ever. Was Anna's kindness misplaced? Had we invited danger into our home? That night, Anna came in late, her face pale and drawn. The light in her eyes flickered but didn't go out. "They're accusing David," she said softly as she set her bag down. "I know it's not true. I trust him." I wanted to believe her. After all, Anna had spent hours talking with David, seeing beyond the surface. But fear whispered in my ear and doubt shadowed my thoughts. "Grace," Richard said quietly when I told him about the call, "we can't keep living like this. The neighbors are talking, the police are involved. We're risking everything." I looked at him, my husband, my partner, and felt the chasm between us widen. He wanted safety control order. I wanted to believe in my daughter's compassion, but I was crumbling under the pressure. Anna's voice broke through my thoughts one evening as she sat across from me at the kitchen table. "If we give up on them now," she said, eyes burning with conviction, "what kind of people are we? How can we call ourselves family if we turn our backs on those who need us?" Her words were like a blade, sharp and painful, but true. The days that followed were a tense dance between hope and fear. The neighborhood grew colder, the whispers louder. Friends avoided us. Strangers eyed us suspiciously. I found myself torn between defending Anna's faith in these people and the growing reality that our trust might have been misplaced. One afternoon, determined to see things for myself, I visited David. I wanted to understand the man my daughter believed in so fiercely. I found him in a small, cluttered room in a halfway house Anna had helped him find. His eyes met mine, worn but hopeful. He told me his story, how he lost his job when the factory closed, how he spiraled into despair after his marriage fell apart, how the streets swallowed him whole. He denied the theft accusations, explaining that fear and misunderstanding often painted people like him in a bad light. I listened, torn between sympathy and skepticism. But I saw the humanity in him, the same humanity Anna saw. Leaving that place, I realized just how much Anna's world had opened up, a world I was only beginning to glimpse. But the stakes were higher than I'd ever imagined. One night, everything came to a head. I was jolted awake by shouting downstairs. Heart pounding, I rushed down to find two of the guests locked in a violent argument. Chairs toppled, glass shattered, and the air was thick with anger. I stood frozen, helpless as my sanctuary turned into chaos. Richard arrived moments later, his face pale but resolute. "Enough," he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. He demanded Anna stop bringing strangers into our home, that this chaos was destroying our family. The confrontation was raw and painful. Anna's tears fell freely as she defended her choices, telling us this was her life now. For the first time, I saw the full weight of the strain tearing us apart. I wanted to beg for peace, for understanding, but the cracks were too deep. That night, lying awake in the dark, I wondered if our family could survive the storm we'd unleashed. Could love really be enough to hold us together? The days afterward were filled with heavy silence and forced smiles. Anna threw herself deeper into her mission, determined to prove her path was right. Richard withdrew, burying himself in work and avoidance. I was caught in the middle, trying to hold the pieces together. One afternoon, as I sat in the quiet of the living room, I realized something had to change. The home I loved was breaking apart, and if we didn't act, it might be beyond repair. I reached out to a local shelter, connecting Anna with professionals who could help her manage the guests better. It was a difficult conversation. Anna was resistant, proud of her independence and mission, but eventually she agreed. Slowly, the chaos began to subside. The guests found new support, new opportunities. Our home regained some of its peace, but the journey was far from over. Every step forward came with setbacks, every small victory shadowed by fear. Yet through it all, I learned something profound, that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes love has to be guided by wisdom and boundaries, and sometimes the hardest thing is learning to trust not just others, but each other. After the chaos settled, a fragile calm returned to our home, but the kind of calm that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the storm to come back. Anna and I had begun working with the local shelter. It was a tentative partnership, a way for her to continue her mission with support and structure. But even with professionals involved, the emotional weight never lightened. I watched Anna every day, her determination never wavering, but the exhaustion lining her face growing deeper. The compassion she poured out was fierce, like a wildfire burning through everything, but I worried it might consume her. Our family dinners slowly returned to something resembling normal, though the ghosts of our past weeks hovered in every corner. Richard tried to pretend everything was fine, but his silences spoke volumes. He was a man breaking under pressure, and I wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on. One late afternoon, I found Anna in the garden, kneeling beside a small flower bed. Her hands were dirty, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mom," she said, without looking up, "I feel like I'm drowning sometimes." I sat beside her, the earth cool beneath my hands. "I know, sweetheart. I know." She finally looked at me, vulnerability spilling out like a broken dam. "I want to help. I really do. But it's like the more I help, the more broken I feel. The more I carry with me." Her words struck me like a punch to the chest. For so long I'd seen her as the strong one, the one who could carry the world. But here she was, crumbling in front of me. "Anna," I whispered, "you don't have to carry it all alone." We talked for hours that evening about fear, pain, and the impossible balance of loving too much and needing boundaries. She admitted to nights she lay awake haunted by the faces of the people she'd helped, wondering if she was doing enough or if it was all just a temporary fix. I shared my fears too, about safety, about losing our family, about how every day felt like walking a tightrope. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. But as honest as it was, the external pressures didn't fade. One morning we woke up to the sound of pounding on the door. The police again. This time, it wasn't just questions, they were here to remove a guest who had violated parole. Anna stood firm, fighting for the man she believed was trying to turn his life around. The tension in the house was palpable. Richard's patience snapped. "This has to end," he yelled, voice breaking. "We're destroying ourselves." Anna looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I can't stop, Dad. Not yet." I felt torn, watching my husband and daughter clash like two forces impossible to reconcile. That night I sat in the kitchen alone, the house silent except for the distant sounds of the city. I realized then that our story wasn't just about homelessness or charity. It was about redemption and forgiveness for others and for ourselves. About learning to love imperfectly with all the mess and heartbreak. And about the courage it takes to keep going, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. Days later, Anna invited me to a community meeting at the shelter. I went unsure what to expect, but there, surrounded by faces worn by hardship and hope, I saw the true impact of her mission. Stories of transformation, of second chances, of people rising from the ashes. For the first time, I understood fully and deeply why Anna couldn't turn away. Our home was still fragile, our family still raw, but somewhere inside me, a quiet hope was growing. Because love, messy, painful, and complicated, can be the strongest thing of all. I remember the morning vividly, the kind of morning where the sun pours in through the windows and everything seems possible, even when the weight of yesterday still lingers. But that day was different. There was a quiet tension, an undercurrent of something brewing beneath the surface that I couldn't quite name. Anna woke earlier than usual, her face pale but determined. She moved around the kitchen like a whirlwind, preparing coffee packing bags and gathering supplies. When I asked her what was going on, she hesitated, then said, "I'm taking some of the guests to the shelter for a workshop. They want to help us get them back on their feet." I smiled, faintly proud but worried. Each step Anna took toward helping others was a battle for her heart and for our family. We had come so far from those chaotic days when strangers filled our home without warning to this carefully coordinated effort with the shelter's support. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the calm before another storm. Later that day, I followed Anna to the shelter, not quite knowing what to expect. The building was unassuming, a modest brick structure with faded paint and a small garden out front, but inside was something else entirely. Voices filled the rooms, soft laughter, tears, hopeful chatter, and everywhere I looked, I saw stories etched into faces. Faces that had known pain loss and yet carried the fragile hope of new beginnings. Anna greeted everyone with a warmth that melted away years of distrust. She wasn't just a volunteer or advocate here, she was family, a beacon of light in the dark. I watched as she sat with a man named Carlos, whose rough exterior masked a heart aching for a second chance. I saw her listening intently, offering encouragement, never judging. In that moment, I realized how deeply she was connected to this work, not just through her past, but through something bigger than herself. But as the hours passed, I noticed something else, a flicker of doubt in Anna's eyes. The weight of responsibility was immense, and I could see the strain. After the workshop, as we drove home in silence, I reached out. "Anna, are you okay?" She sighed, her breath heavy with exhaustion. "I want to do more, Mom. But sometimes it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle, like no matter how much I give, it's never enough." Her words echoed my own fears. The truth was, we were both tired, worn thin by the struggles, by the heartache, by the endless fight to hold our family and our lives together. That night, I found myself staring at the ceiling, wrestling with my own fears. Could Anna sustain this passion without breaking? Could we survive the toll it was taking on us all? The next morning brought a new challenge. Anna came home with news that one of the guests, Lisa, had relapsed after weeks of sobriety. The fragile progress was shattered in a moment, and I saw the devastation on Anna's face. "I failed her," she whispered, voice cracking. "I should have done more." I pulled her into a hug, knowing that no amount of love could erase the complexities of addiction and recovery. "We're not failures," I said softly. "We're human. We keep trying, and that's what matters." But even as I spoke those words, the cracks in our family's foundation were widening. Richard was quieter than ever. He retreated into himself, avoiding confrontation, but simmering with resentment. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, he exploded. "I can't live like this anymore. This isn't the life I imagined for us." Anna shot back, her voice fierce but pained. "This is my life now, Dad. You either accept it or don't." I felt caught in the crossfire, helpless and heartbroken. The walls of our home seemed to close in the silence between us, growing heavier with each passing day. I knew then that something had to give. We needed help, not just for Anna and her guests, but for our family. I reached out to a counselor recommended by the shelter, hoping to find a way to bridge the gap between Richard and Anna, and to heal the wounds that were threatening to tear us apart. Our first session was awkward and raw. We sat around the small room, strangers to each other's pain and fears. But slowly, the walls began to crumble. Richard spoke of his fear and loss, the man he had been before everything changed. Anna shared her anger and her hope, her need to make a difference. And I told my story, the fear of losing them both, the struggle to hold on. It wasn't magic. It wasn't instant. But it was a start. Over the weeks, therapy became a lifeline. We learned to listen, really listen, without judgment. We began to understand each other's fears and dreams in a way we never had before. And the family that once felt fractured began to stitch itself back together, messy, imperfect, but real. Anna continued her work with the shelter, but now with boundaries that protected her spirit and our home. Richard found new ways to support her mission, sometimes quietly, sometimes with a newfound pride. And I learned that love isn't about perfection or control, it's about resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to keep trying. Our journey was far from over. There would be more battles, more heartbreak, more moments when everything felt like it was falling apart. But there was also hope. And that hope, fragile and fierce, was enough to keep us moving forward. The days following our first family therapy session felt like walking through a fog, uncertain, fragile, but filled with the faintest glimmers of hope. I could see the changes in Richard, subtle but real. His rigid walls softened, his silences giving way to tentative conversations. Anna seemed lighter too, less burdened by the weight she'd been carrying alone for so long. Yet even with progress, the road ahead was steep, and the challenges we faced weren't going to disappear overnight. One afternoon, as I was sorting through mail, I found a letter that stopped me cold. It was from the landlord of one of the guests Anna had been helping Marcus. The letter was terse and cold, a formal eviction notice. Apparently, Marcus had caused damage to the property and violated lease terms. I felt a heavy sinking in my chest. Marcus was a complicated man, yes, but he was trying. To hear that he was being pushed out, cast away again, broke something inside me. I shared the letter with Anna that evening. She read it silently, her jaw clenched tight. "We can't let him fall through the cracks again," she said quietly. I knew then that her fight wasn't just about the people who walked through our door, it was about every soul pushed to the edges, fighting to be seen and heard. That week, Anna and I worked together to find Marcus a temporary place to stay. It wasn't easy, resources were limited, and the world outside was often unforgiving. As we navigated this maze, I watched Anna's resilience and determination grow, but I also saw the toll it took on her spirit. The sleepless nights, the endless phone calls, the frustration of a system that sometimes failed those who needed it most. One night, after a long day of searching, Anna sat beside me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom," she whispered, "sometimes it feels like I'm fighting a losing battle. Like no matter how much I do, it's never enough." I reached out, holding her hand tightly. "It's okay to feel that way. What matters is that you don't give up." We sat together in silence, the quiet between us filled with unspoken love and understanding. In the midst of these struggles, our family began to find a new rhythm. Richard started volunteering at the shelter quietly, helping with logistics and fundraising. It was his way of supporting Anna's mission without overwhelming himself. Our dinners became times of genuine connection, filled with stories of hope and healing from the shelter. The walls that once held tension and fear were slowly being replaced by a sense of shared purpose. But just when we thought we were finding our footing, a new challenge emerged. One evening, a call came from the shelter coordinator, urgent and worried. Lisa, the fragile woman Anna had first brought into our home months ago, had disappeared. The news hit me like a thunderclap. Lisa had come so far, showing glimpses of strength and hope. To hear she was missing was devastating. Anna was beside herself with worry. We organized a search party, calling friends, neighbors, anyone who might have seen her. Days passed with no sign of Lisa. The fear and uncertainty weighed heavily on all of us. Finally, a breakthrough came when a neighbor spotted her at a nearby park, disoriented and scared. We brought her back safe, but fragile. It was a turning point for Lisa, for Anna, and for our family. We realized then that healing wasn't linear. There would be setbacks, moments of despair, but also moments of grace. Throughout it all, I learned the power of persistence and the strength found in community. Our family was no longer just surviving. We were beginning to thrive, imperfect, scarred, but stronger for it. Looking back, I see that the journey was never just about helping others. It was about healing ourselves, confronting our fears, and learning to love fiercely in the face of uncertainty. Anna's mission became our mission, and together we found a way forward, one step, one story, one life at a time. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. But the story of our family, fractured, challenged, yet unyielding, kept unfolding like a slow, powerful river carving its way through stubborn stone. With every twist and turn, I learned more about strength, forgiveness, and the messy beauty of love that doesn't always look like the stories we imagine. Anna's work with the shelter was expanding, and so was her vision. She had become a pillar in that community, a beacon of hope for those whose lives had been shattered by circumstance. But with growth came pressure on her heart, her time, and on our family. One evening, after a particularly long day at the shelter, Anna came home with an invitation. It was from a local foundation interested in funding programs for homeless women, a chance to bring more resources and attention to their cause. I could see the fire in her eyes as she showed me the letter. "This could change everything, Mom." But as excited as she was, I noticed a shadow behind that spark, a weariness that clung to her like a second skin. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "I have to be." Richard, too, stepped forward in unexpected ways. He volunteered to organize fundraising events, tapping into contacts he had never mentioned before. It was like watching a new side of him emerge, one driven, not by fear, but by purpose. Our home was no longer just a refuge for strangers. It was a base of operations, a place where dreams were born and battles fought. Yet even with progress, the challenges didn't disappear. The people Anna helped were still vulnerable, their lives precarious and fragile. One day, I received a call that would shake us to our core. It was from the shelter. One of Anna's closest guests, Marcus, had been found injured in a nearby alley. Someone had attacked him, and he was in the hospital. I remember the cold dread that settled in my stomach. This was the reality we'd been trying to shield ourselves from, the harshness of the world outside bleeding into our lives. Anna rushed to the hospital, her face pale but resolute. I went with her, holding her hand tightly as we waited for news. Marcus was stable but badly shaken. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. Sitting by his bedside, Anna whispered words of comfort, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now. We're going to get through this." Watching her, I realized how much she had become the heart of this mission, not just saving others, but saving herself in the process. The days after the attack were some of the hardest. Fear gripped us all, but Anna's resolve only deepened. She organized safety workshops, reached out to the community, and worked tirelessly to create a safer environment for those she loved. Our family rallied around her. Richard, once distant, stood by her side at every event. I found strength in their unity even as I worried about what the future held. One evening, as we sat together after a fundraiser, Anna turned to me and said, "Mom, I want to tell you something." I looked at her, curious. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared that I'm not enough. That the world is too cruel and my efforts are just drops in an ocean." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You're more than enough. You're changing lives even if you don't see it every day." She smiled weakly, but I knew the battle inside her was ongoing. Our family's journey had transformed us in ways I never imagined. We had faced darkness, chaos, and heartbreak. We had stood on the edge of collapse and found a way to rebuild. But the road was long and the fight far from over. Through it all, I learned that love is messy and complicated. It's not always perfect, but it's relentless. It's the choice to keep going, to keep believing, even when the world tells you to give up. Anna's mission became our mission. Her courage inspired us all. And in the end, that was enough. The story of our family was no longer just about survival, it was about transformation. The walls that once confined us had begun to fall away, revealing a landscape both unfamiliar and full of promise. But transformation, I learned, comes with its own kind of struggle. It tests your soul, pushes your limits, and forces you to confront truths you might rather ignore. Anna's dedication to the shelter and those she helped had become a force of nature, unstoppable, fierce, and sometimes overwhelming. I saw her lose sleep over the fragile lives she was trying to save, agonize over setbacks, and celebrate small victories with a joy that lit up the darkest days. Richard, too, had changed. No longer the silent bystander, he was a partner in this journey, learning to balance his fears with newfound hope. But beneath his steady exterior, I sensed the tension still simmered, a tension born of the many battles we had yet to fight. One afternoon, as I was sorting through the mail, I found a thick envelope addressed to me. It was from Anna's college, the place where her journey had begun. Curiosity piqued, I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter informing me of a scholarship program Anna had been selected for, an opportunity to continue her education in social work with full funding. It was a recognition of her passion and commitment, a chance to deepen the impact she was already making. Tears welled in my eyes as I read the words. I immediately called Anna to share the news. Her voice on the other end was shaky, but filled with hope. "This could change everything, Mom," she said. But the excitement was tempered by the reality of our lives. Balancing schoolwork at the shelter and family wasn't going to be easy. As Anna prepared for this new chapter, I saw her struggle with the weight of expectations, her own and those of the people who depended on her. One evening, after a long day of classes and shelter work, she collapsed on the couch, exhaustion written all over her face. "I'm scared I won't be able to do it all," she confessed. "That I'll let everyone down." I sat beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You're stronger than you think," I said. "And you don't have to do it alone." Our family was learning to carry each other's burdens, to share the load instead of trying to bear it alone. But the pressures weren't just external. Old wounds surfaced, bringing pain and unresolved conflict back into focus. One night, Richard and Anna argued about priorities, his desire for stability clashing with her relentless drive to make a difference. "I'm trying to protect us," he said, voice strained. "But sometimes it feels like you're choosing your mission over your family." Anna's eyes flashed with hurt and defiance. "This mission is our family. It's why we're still standing." The fight left us all shaken, reminding me how delicate the balance still was. In the quiet aftermath, I reflected on how far we'd come and how much further we still had to go. Then came the call that no mother wants to receive. Anna was hospitalized after collapsing from exhaustion and stress. The doctors told us she needed rest time to heal. It was a brutal reminder that even the strongest among us can break. Sitting by her bedside, I held her hand and whispered promises to protect her, to support her, to help her find peace. The weeks that followed were slow and painful. Anna learned to ask for help, to accept limits, and to care for herself as fiercely as she cared for others. Richard and I rallied around her, our family bond deepening in ways we hadn't imagined possible. In that time, I realized the true meaning of strength. It's not just about fighting battles, but knowing when to rest, when to heal, and when to lean on those who love you. Our journey was far from over, but as I looked at Anna, her spirit bruised but unbroken, I knew we would face whatever came next together. Because love, in all its messy, complicated glory, was the thread holding us tight. And that thread would never break. I never imagined that the simple act of bringing a homeless person home could unravel our lives in ways I wasn't prepared for. When my daughter first insisted on taking in a stranger, my mind immediately jumped to worst-case scenarios. I feared for our safety, for the sanctity of our home, and the quiet life I had spent decades building. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the chain of unexpected consequences that followed, consequences that tore at the fabric of my family and tested every ounce of my patience, compassion, and resolve. The man my daughter brought home that evening seemed harmless enough at first glance. He was tall and lean, with hands weathered by years of hard work, and eyes heavy with exhaustion, eyes that had clearly seen too much pain. I watched as she welcomed him in her voice, gentle but firm, offering him food and a place to rest. Despite myself, I was struck by her unwavering kindness. But beneath my admiration lurked a persistent knot of anxiety. I felt helpless watching her ignore my repeated warnings, convinced she was doing the right thing but blind to the risks. The first few days passed with an uneasy calm. The man whose name I learned was James kept mostly to himself, and the household tried to adjust to his presence. My daughter seemed energized by her mission, her face glowing with purpose. She took on the role of caretaker, and I couldn't help but feel torn. Part of me wanted to believe in her hope. The other part feared the fragile peace we once knew was slipping away. But then the cracks began to show. It started with small things, items misplaced or missing entirely. At first, I told myself it was absent-mindedness, the usual chaos of a busy household. But the truth soon became impossible to ignore. One evening, I reached into my purse to find my wallet lighter, a few bills missing. A set of car keys vanished for a full day, sending me into a panic. Then my daughter's cell phone went missing for a few hours, only to be found tucked under the couch cushions. These incidents might have been innocent, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but suspect James. My daughter brushed off my concerns with a dismissive wave. "You're being paranoid, Mom," she said firmly. "James isn't a thief. He's just struggling." Her words stung, not because they were untrue, but because I could feel the widening gap between us, a divide caused by her refusal to see the dangers I was warning about. The atmosphere in the house grew tense, shadows lurking in every corner. Late at night, I would lie awake, straining to hear whispers and muffled voices from downstairs, conversations I wasn't meant to overhear. Sometimes I caught fragments of urgent, hushed exchanges between my daughter and James, words I couldn't quite make out, but that felt heavy with unspoken trouble. One night, my fears were realized in the most shocking way. I was roused from a restless sleep by a loud crash echoing through the house. My heart pounded in my chest as I hurried downstairs, the hallway light casting long, eerie shadows. In the kitchen, I found James sprawled on the floor unconscious, a shattered bottle of whiskey lying beside him. My daughter knelt next to him, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling. "He's been struggling with his demons." "I didn't know how to help him," she whispered, barely audible. That moment shattered something inside me. I felt the weight of helplessness crush me, the helplessness of watching someone you love hurt themselves, of watching your home become a place of pain and chaos. I helped her lift James onto the couch, and together we called for emergency help. The paramedics arrived quickly, taking him to the hospital for treatment, but this incident was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the ripple effects of bringing James into our home grew into a wave of turmoil. Medical bills arrived, mounting higher than we expected. I watched as my daughter juggled phone calls with social workers, doctors, and counselors, trying to navigate a system I barely understood. I admired her determination, but my heart ached with worry. This wasn't the peaceful home I had dreamed of anymore. Neighborhood whispers began to circulate, subtle at first, but growing louder with each passing day. People who once nodded politely now avoided eye contact or exchanged knowing looks when they passed by. Rumors spread like wildfire about the strangers living under our roof, the disruptions, the police visits. I could feel the judgment seeping through the walls, poisoning what little peace remained. One afternoon, a police officer showed up at our door, a stern look on his face. "We've had reports of disturbances," he said. "We just want to ensure everyone's safety." I nodded silently, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. I felt the cold sting of shame, not just for my daughter's actions, but for the fragile illusion of control I had always maintained. But the worst was yet to come. A woman appeared unannounced at our doorstep one morning, a sharp-eyed woman with a voice that cut through the quiet like a blade. She introduced herself as someone from my daughter's past, someone connected to the homeless community my daughter had so passionately embraced. Her tone was accusatory, questioning the men we sheltered, stirring up old wounds I hadn't even known existed. Her arrival reopened scars I had tried to bury, forcing secrets into the light and threatening to unravel everything we had left. Tensions between my daughter and me escalated, each conversation more charged and bitter than the last. Our disagreements no longer revolved solely around James or the strangers we took in, but about trust, respect, and the boundaries we had failed to set. Our home, once a sanctuary, felt like a battlefield. Every room echoed with silent accusations, every meal was tense, every glance weighed heavy with unspoken resentment. I struggled to hold on to my love for my daughter amidst the chaos, but the strain was suffocating. In moments of quiet, I wrestled with my own guilt. Was I too harsh? Had I failed to see the good in my daughter's heart? Was my fear blinding me to the possibility of redemption? These questions haunted me late into the night, twisting like a knife in my gut. Yet despite the storm raging inside me, a fragile hope remained. I believed, or perhaps I hoped, that through all the chaos, through all the brokenness, there was a chance for healing. That we could find a way back to each other, back to the family we once were. But for now, I had to face the truth. Love alone wasn't enough to fix what was broken. Sometimes love had to be tempered with boundaries, with tough choices that no mother wants to make. And so I stood at the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to step forward into the unknown or retreat to the safety of what was left. The unexpected consequences of my daughter's compassion had brought us here to a place where family forgiveness and survival all collided. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for sure: our lives would never be the same again. The day of the confrontation was not one I had wished for, but deep down, I knew it was inevitable. The house, once my sanctuary, had become a pressure cooker of silent resentments and half-spoken fears. Every interaction with my daughter had grown more strained, more guarded, and I could feel the distance between us widening with every passing hour. That morning, I woke to a heavy silence that settled over the house like a storm cloud. The air was thick with unsaid words, with the weight of months of tension finally reaching a breaking point. I had spent the night tossing and turning, rehearsing in my mind how I might bridge the growing chasm between us, how I could finally make her understand the fear and pain that lay beneath my protests. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized that understanding might not come from gentle words or patient pleas. Sometimes it had to come through raw, honest confrontation, the kind that leaves scars but clears the air. She was in the kitchen when I finally found the courage to speak. My daughter Emma was preparing breakfast, her movements brisk but distracted. The man we had taken in, James, sat at the table quietly sipping coffee, his eyes distant and heavy. For a moment, I felt like an outsider in my own home. Emma. I began, my voice trembling slightly. We need to talk. Seriously talk. She looked up, startled, a flicker of something unreadable passing through her eyes. Mom, I'm busy. Can this wait? No, it can't, I said firmly. Not anymore. Consequences. You mean the consequences of showing kindness, of doing the right thing? No, I whispered, feeling tears prick my eyes. The consequences of ignoring the danger, of risking our family's safety and peace. We stood there locked in a silent standoff, the past month's pain and misunderstanding pressing down on us. The kitchen felt smaller, the walls closing in, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Emma said something that cut deeper than any argument. You don't trust me. You never did. That was the moment I broke. I collapsed onto the chair, the weight of everything crashing down. I do trust you, Emma. But I'm scared because I love you. For a long moment we sat in silence, the truth hanging between us like a fragile thread. Then she took a hesitant step forward. I'm scared too, Mom. Scared you'll give up on me. No, I said firmly, reaching out to take her hand. I'll never give up on you. The tears came then, two women bound by blood and love, but battered by pain and fear. We talked for hours that day, really talked, about fears and hopes, about mistakes and forgiveness, about boundaries and love. I shared my worries about safety, the rumors in the neighborhood, the police visits. She told me about the men she was trying to help, their stories, their struggles. We didn't resolve everything that day. There were still hard truths to face, hard decisions to make. But for the first time in a long time, we saw each other not just as mother and daughter, but as human beings trying to navigate a complicated world. The confrontation was painful, raw, and messy, but it was also the beginning of healing, a step towards understanding that neither of us had been ready to take before. As the evening settled in, I realized something important: confrontation doesn't have to mean the end. Sometimes it's the first step towards a new beginning. And yet there was something different in her eyes, a softness, a weariness that wasn't there before. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the living room sipping tea and lost in thought, I heard raised voices from the kitchen. My heart jumped, expecting another fight. But when I stood and walked toward the sound, I saw Emma standing with a young man I didn't recognize. His clothes were worn, his hands trembling slightly. He looked nervous, almost ashamed. Emma's voice was calm but firm. "This is Michael. He's been on the streets for months." I studied the young man carefully. There was a fragility about him that went beyond his appearance. Something in his eyes spoke of pain, but also a glimmer of hope. Emma turned to me. "He needs a place to stay for a while, just until he can get back on his feet." I felt the old familiar surge of fear and anger rise in my chest, but then something made me stop. Maybe it was the look on Michael's face or the quiet desperation in Emma's voice. For once, I didn't say no right away. Instead, I nodded slowly. "All right, but on one condition: we have rules, clear boundaries. This can't go on forever." Emma smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that made my heart ache. That night, as we sat around the dinner table with Michael quietly eating his meal, something shifted. The house didn't feel so chaotic. The atmosphere was quieter, more hopeful. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we were finding a way forward. But the true tipping point came a few days later, a day that would change everything. I was in the kitchen when Michael came to me, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said softly, "I want to thank you for giving me a chance." His voice was steady, but I could see the raw emotion beneath. I invited him to sit, and he began to share his story. He told me about the accident that had taken his job, and home, the spiral of bad luck and lost opportunities, and the nights spent alone in the cold. His words were simple, but each one carried the weight of a life shattered and slowly being pieced back together. As he spoke, I felt the walls I'd built around my heart begin to crumble. His story wasn't so different from the many I'd heard as a teacher: stories of struggle, resilience, and the desperate need for a helping hand. Later that day, Emma joined me in the living room, and we talked, really talked about what Michael's presence meant for all of us. She admitted that her passion sometimes blinded her to the risks, and I confessed how my fears sometimes made me close off to hope. We realized that neither of us was right or wrong. We were just two women trying to protect what we loved in different ways. That evening, we sat together watching Michael work on a small project in the backyard, building a garden box from reclaimed wood. The simple act of creating something beautiful and new despite the odds was a metaphor I couldn't ignore. In that moment, I understood that the tipping point wasn't about winning or losing an argument. It was about opening our hearts to the messy, complicated reality of love that demands sacrifice, patience, and sometimes surrender. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of challenges and small victories. Michael found a part-time job, started attending counseling sessions, and slowly reclaimed pieces of his life. Emma and I found ways to support each other, sharing the load instead of fighting over it. I learned to let go of some of my fears, trusting Emma's judgment more. She learned to listen to my concerns without dismissing them. The neighborhood's whispers didn't disappear overnight, but we faced them together, standing firm in our choice to open our home, even if it meant facing judgment. There were setbacks, of course. Days when Michael struggled with old habits, when Emma's frustration flared, and when I doubted whether any of it was worth it. But those moments were outweighed by the hope we saw growing, hope for Michael, for our family, and for the future we were slowly building. One afternoon, as I helped Michael plant seedlings in the garden, I realized that the tipping point had changed more than just our family's story. It had changed me. I was no longer just a frightened mother trying to protect her home. I was part of a fragile community bound by compassion and resilience. Emma's unwavering belief in doing what's right, even when it's hard, reminded me why I loved her so fiercely. And Michael's courage to keep trying despite everything showed me that redemption is possible, even in the darkest places. That day, as the sun warmed our faces and the soil turned beneath our hands, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The tipping point had come and gone, and with it a new chapter began. A chapter where love and forgiveness weren't just words, but the foundation of everything we hoped to build. The days following our tipping point felt like walking through a fog, thick and uncertain, but charged with the possibility of something new. Emma and I both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy yet. The first fragile steps toward understanding had been taken. It was as if the long, tense silence between us had finally cracked, allowing sunlight to spill through the fractures. Our home was still a battleground in many ways, a place where old wounds sometimes reopened and where misunderstandings simmered beneath polite words. But there was something different now, a conscious effort to listen, to pause, and to meet each other halfway. The first real breakthrough came during a quiet afternoon in the kitchen. Emma was washing dishes and I was folding laundry nearby. The rhythm of our chores, once mechanical and cold, seemed to create a bridge between us. Without looking up, she said softly, "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said about boundaries." I felt a pang of hope. "I'm glad," I replied gently. "I know it's not easy for either of us." She nodded, the bubbles in the sink catching the light like tiny crystals. "I want to find a way to help people without tearing our family apart. Maybe. Maybe we can set some rules about how many guests we can take in, or how long they stay." Her words surprised me, not because they were reasonable, but because I could see her willingness to compromise, to consider my fears alongside her dreams. "I think that's a good start," I said. "I've been so afraid that our home would become unrecognizable, that we'd lose our sense of peace. But I realize now that peace isn't about silence or emptiness, it's about balance." That conversation, simple as it was, became the seed of a new understanding. From there, Emma and I began to work out practical solutions, creating schedules for who stayed when, involving other family members to share responsibility, and setting clear expectations for behavior and contributions. It wasn't perfect, far from it. There were days when frustrations boiled over, when boundaries were pushed, or when past resentments bubbled to the surface. But we kept coming back to the table, literally and figuratively, to talk it through. One evening, after a particularly difficult day when a guest had caused a mess and tempers had flared, Emma pulled me aside. "Mom, I want to tell you something," she said, voice tentative. "I've been scared too. Scared that you'd give up on me, or that I'd lose you." Her honesty broke through layers of anger and disappointment I hadn't even known I was holding. I took her hands in mine, feeling the tension melt away just a little. "I'm scared sometimes too," I admitted. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." That night, as we sat together, I realized that understanding was more than just agreeing on rules. It was about acknowledging each other's fears, hopes, and flaws, about choosing love even when it's hard. Outside our home, the world continued to be complicated. The neighbors' whispers persisted, and some friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the changes in our lives. Yet Emma and I found strength in our shared journey. We also began reaching out beyond our walls, connecting with community organizations that helped homeless people find stable housing and employment. Emma spearheaded efforts to organize donation drives and volunteer days, bringing our family and neighbors together in ways I hadn't imagined possible. Involving others gave me a new sense of hope and purpose. It reminded me that compassion isn't just about individual acts, but about building networks of care and support. At the same time, I worked on healing my own heart. I sought counseling to process the hurt and anger that had accumulated over the years, to unearth old wounds, and learn to forgive not just Emma, but myself. That process wasn't easy. There were days when grief overwhelmed me, when memories of our conflicts replayed like a relentless storm. But through the pain, I found resilience, a quiet strength born from vulnerability. One afternoon, as I walked through the garden with Emma and Michael, who had become a steady presence in our lives, I realized how much had changed. The garden was flourishing, a vibrant patchwork of colors and life, a living metaphor for the growth we were nurturing within our family. Michael had found stable work, and with his progress came a renewed sense of dignity and hope. Seeing him thrive reminded me of the power of second chances and the importance of community. Emma and I talked openly about the future, about hopes for healing old family rifts, rebuilding trust, and embracing the messy, beautiful complexity of love. We acknowledged that understanding wasn't a destination, but a journey, one that would require patience, humility, and grace. In those moments, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. Not the kind of peace born from silence or avoidance, but the kind that comes from facing truth, accepting imperfections, and choosing connection over conflict. Our family was still fragile, still imperfect, but it was alive, growing, learning, and moving forward. And that, I realized, was enough. As days turned into weeks, our new way of living slowly settled into a rhythm. Emma and I still clashed. Sometimes old habits die hard, but now our disagreements were tempered by the understanding that we were on the same team. The house, once filled with tension and unspoken resentments, began to feel more like home again. One of the most profound changes happened not in grand gestures, but in the quiet, everyday moments. We started sharing meals without the heavy weight of judgment. We laughed again, sometimes awkwardly at first, but genuinely. I found myself looking forward to conversations with Emma, even the difficult ones, because I knew they were part of healing. Our family began to expand in unexpected ways. The people Emma brought into our lives, once strangers, became threads woven into our daily tapestry. Michael's progress was a beacon of hope, but even more than that, his presence reminded me that people are more than their past mistakes or hardships. There were times when I caught myself smiling at the sound of footsteps in the hallway or the hum of conversation in the kitchen. It was chaos, yes, but it was also life, messy, complicated, and beautiful. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emma joined me. We didn't say much at first, just sat in companionable silence. Then she spoke. "Mom, thank you," she said simply. I looked at her, surprised. "For not giving up on me, for trying to understand, for letting me be me even when it was hard." Tears welled up in my eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me too." In that moment, I realized that our journey toward understanding had transformed us both. We had moved from fear and anger to acceptance and love. We had learned that family isn't about perfection, but about showing up even when it's painful. As the stars emerged overhead, I felt a quiet gratitude for the battles we'd fought, the lessons we'd learned, and the love that had carried us through. The steps toward understanding were ongoing, and the path ahead was still uncertain, but we were walking it together, and that made all the difference. The days after our breakthrough felt quieter, like the calm after a storm that had battered us all, but left something stronger in its wake. Emma and I didn't suddenly agree on everything that was never going to happen, but we found a silent solution, something unspoken, yet powerful, the choice to coexist with love, even when complete understanding remained just out of reach. I learned to live with the imperfections in our family, the messy, unfinished chapters that didn't fit neatly into any fairy tale ending. Emma kept her passion, her willingness to open our doors to those in need. And I kept my caution, my need for boundaries to protect what we'd built. We stopped trying to control each other and started respecting the different ways we showed love. There were mornings when the house buzzed with guests' laughter and stories. There were nights when silence fell over the rooms heavy with unresolved feelings. Both were part of our reality now. One evening, as I sat in my favorite chair watching Emma help Michael prepare dinner, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Despite all the chaos, the betrayals, and the pain here, we were still a family. I thought about the journey we'd traveled, the warnings I gave, the defiance she showed, the secrets uncovered, the confrontations that shook us, and the slow steps toward understanding. Each moment had shaped us, carved new paths in the landscape of our hearts. I realized that love isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet acceptance of imperfection, the silent solution that keeps us connected when words fail. As I reflected, I felt a deep peace settle inside me. Not the kind of peace that means everything is perfect, but the kind that means we are enough just as we are. Our story wasn't a neat ending. It was a messy, ongoing chapter filled with challenges and grace, and that's what made it real. If you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal, the ache of misunderstood love, or the struggle to find peace amid chaos, you're not alone. Our journeys are different, but the heartache and hope are universal. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please share your own experience in the comments. Let's build a community where truth and compassion meet. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to Grace's Truth. There's more truth waiting to be uncovered. Until next time, take care of yourself and those you love, even when it's hard.